would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. As always, the best ways to reach out to me are via the website at therebelbroker.com. From there, you can click contact in the menu bar and send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, questions, whatever might be bouncing around in your head. And of course, while you are there, head on to the very tippy top of the webpage, click the big red button that says take the survey to support the show, and you'll be supporting the show. But to show my appreciation, every month I've been giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to folks who have gone to the trouble of doing that for me. So make sure you use the same email address both times you're asked when you click that button. Answer the demographic questions, and you're all set. And you're in the drawing for next month's $50 Amazon gift card. Now, we've already done the drawing for this month, the month of May. I sent the notice out Friday afternoon last week. I have not heard back yet from that person. So hopefully that person responds soon. If not, I'll be doing a drawing again, and we'll see how that goes. But I'll keep you up to date. We've given away, I think with the most recent one, $450 so far. So congratulations to all the folks who've won, and good luck to those of you who are going to be jumping in soon and giving yourself a chance to win that $50 Amazon gift card. I thought the first thing we should cover today is the WannaCry virus. It's one of those things that's particularly icky because, as I understand it, now this is what I hear from a super high-tech IT guy that I know. While Windows XP is the primary OS that everyone is worried about, and for those of you who don't know, Windows XP is kind of ancient at this point. However, everyone who runs Windows of any flavor, I think, should be aware of things like this. The simplest, and here's what's annoying about this one. This is not one of those issues where you get an enclosure in your email and you click it and it installs a virus. This is not one of those things where you go to a certain website and it pops up a window asking for your permission to do something that sounds innocuous, and then you say okay. This is one of those situations where just your computer, according to my tech guy, just your computer being on, you can get this one happening. It's called a worm, and what it does is it actually goes out, and of course, if you go, I'm sure that there will be emails that will send you URLs that will then specifically try to connect with your system and evaluate whether or not the exploit exists for them to take advantage of your computer. But the thing is, your computer can just be on. This is a worm that actually actively goes out and seeks computers at the end of IP addresses to see if it has an OS on it with the failure in it or the not security patch on it that allows it to go in and start basically encrypting your computer, and it encrypts all your files, and then they want to charge you some amount of money and hold your stuff ransom. And the solution there is simply to have the latest security updates. So the suggestion from my IT guy is to go in and manually go into your updates control in Windows. If you actually just go down there to the little search window and click in update, you'll see it as one of the options that pops up. Go ahead and do it now. If you're one of those folks who never does it, you have it set to only happen when you manually tell it to do it instead of actively in the background all the time. I know a lot of folks do that. I know if you are a parent and you have kids, they have probably screwed with that so that it only does it when they tell it to, because it'll suck up their bandwidth when they're playing online games. So they will tend to do that and then forget to manually go in themselves on a regular basis and take care of this. Now, the patch for this came out actually several months ago because it was one of those things that the NSA had discovered. So the solution here is for you to get the latest software. No amount of discipline on your part in terms of not opening things that come in email or not going to suspicious URLs is going to solve this one for you in terms of vulnerability. But as I do, I would strongly suggest that you back up your very important documents or you store them on something else. So in my case, I carry around a gigantic, well, not physically gigantic, but a storage device with, it's just a thumb. Here, see, this is not the time to be pulling this out, but I have a keychain, and on my keychain are two things: my magical realtor key and my little SanDisk. I don't even know how big this thing is. It's gigantic, but all of my most important files are on this thumb drive. So I never have to worry. I don't put them on the cloud because you never can tell when somebody's going to screw that up and passwords and logons are going to go out into the internets. I'm a little bit more anal about my security of my files than a lot of other people, just because I'm not only carrying around my own personal information, I'm carrying around what's going on with other people's transactions. So I like to be a little bit more conscientious about that stuff. But I think that's a great solution. And so once you're on a system, you can just pop your USB drive on there and get the work done that way and save off your important files. But also remember to be disciplined in other things, because you can, if you do somehow get infected with a virus, which is a different kind of problem, if you are one of those folks who crazily downloads any attachments from anything from everyone or go to crazy websites and do weird things, you can actually infect files on your USB drive, and then you're the person who's walking them around to other systems and causing an issue. How do I solve that problem? I tend to on my computers, I have it set to scan my thumb drive whenever I insert it before it does anything else. So I prevent a problem that way. So just little things you can do in your life to save yourself from this. The last thing you want is something like this, where you could potentially lose some super important files, not to mention your photos, right? I mean, photos are such a huge deal for folks. And if you're not backing them up to the cloud in some way or backing them up somewhere locally, you might want to consider something called an NAS, or a network attached storage device, which is basically something that lives out on your network at your home. And you can have everything stored there. Even those aren't 100% immune to attacks like this, unfortunately, but typically it's only going to hurt storage that's physically connected to the computer. It's not going to be network attached storage that's going to be a victim of this stuff. Now, I realize I've thrown some terms at you. This isn't really what this show is about, but you know what? Taking your personal information seriously is super important to your real estate career, whether you're an investor or just a regular old buyer or a seller or anybody, because nothing is worse than trying to recover from someone either getting your personal information and using it out there to get crazy loans, or potentially getting their hands on very private documents that would make it hard for you to protect the integrity of your credit and other types of things. Okay, so with that out of the way, let me also suggest that while you're there at the site, checking out that Take the Survey to Support the Show button, you can also click the red button that'll be in the show notes for today's show to join the Rebel Underground. Now, the Rebel Underground is a group of folks that are interested in getting sort of the inside scoop on things. And I realize for those of you who are members of the Rebel Underground, you don't get pinged a lot. Not a lot's going on right now. There's one video that is exclusive only to folks in the Rebel Underground. I do promise you, I have plans for the Rebel Underground for expansion there. There's also going to be expansion in some other areas, but all of that's really been put on hold until my transaction with my own property, my own home happens, and I get this place sold and I move on to another property. So I apologize for that, but then that's the reason why we've had spotty posting of shows over the last few weeks, where we had one full week where there were no shows. And thank you very much for your patience. And I appreciate those of you who checked in to see what was going on with me during this time. Nothing horrible. One update that I'd want to give you is we had talked about my schedule, and I was more or less on schedule, and now I am not. I am finding that the relative I was going to be using as my contractor is still wrapped up doing stuff for my mother. And at the rate he's going, he's not going to be done until the end of next month with her stuff. And I am not comfortable waiting for that long. The bottom line is that statistically over the last 5 years, this month and next month and the first couple of weeks of July are the sweet spot. So I really wanted to be on the market by the end of this month, which means I'm either going to have to do a lot of this work myself or find another contractor. So I'm sort of trying to balance that out and figure out what else. I finally gave up, as I mentioned before, and went ahead and installed the fan myself that was 20 feet up in the air, got that done. I'm going to be replacing the back door next. I've replaced doors before, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. It's not a big deal. It's just a question of knowing how to make something level and plumb and all that other kind of wonderful stuff. But there's a lot of other work that I just don't think I can do myself, just because there's not enough of me, right? There's not enough hours in the day. So I'll probably be enlisting the kids and whoever else I can dig up to make this stuff happen. The list of things that need to happen from here is actually pretty short. I'm getting landscaping done tomorrow. Remember, that's one of the things we've talked about that's super important. That curb appeal is critical. My front yard is a little bit steep. It's got a little bit of a driveway that goes up, and there's no real grass. It's a little bit more of a rural sort of low maintenance thing up here, which was all part of the drought that we had over the last few years. So we'll see how we can pretty that up and give it the curb appeal that I'm looking for. And once we're to that point, replacing that door, a couple other minor modifications, I may be able to make it on time doing all the work myself. If not, I'll hire somebody else. But I'll let you know how it goes. It's interesting how you have to have these backup plans when things don't go quite right. But you have to still charge forward. Okay. Now, there's a couple of interesting news tidbits that have come across my desk over the last few days. One of them was a story about Zillow. And this is a very interesting one. It'll be interesting, particularly to see how it turns out. But it's a real estate lawyer who is suing Zillow, calling their Zestimate a, quote, tremendous roadblock to selling her home. Let's see. I think what first jumps out at me is sort of the merit points that are being made here. She's trying to make the point, one, that Zillow shouldn't be allowed to do this by law in Illinois, because you have to be a licensed appraiser to appraise a home. Well, this isn't an appraisal. It's an estimation of value based on market performance that also includes the homes that make up that estimation. So I actually think that the odds are that Zillow is going to prevail in this particular case. We'll have to see. Let's see. Anderson, the owner of the home, says Zillow is in violation of Illinois state law, which forbids people or businesses from issuing appraisals without the proper license. And of course, they're not issuing an appraisal. An appraisal is a very specific document that's used by banks to loan. And as soon as I find a bank that will base their lending on Zillow, I know some areas I'm going to go to immediately to buy a home. Zillow responded by saying, quote, "We always say that the Zestimate is not an appraisal and it's not a price," a Zillow spokesperson told them. "It's an estimate. The way that the Zestimate works is we take all the information we have, anything you put a number on, and we put it all into our algorithm, and it sends out a number." Let's see. According to the complaint, Anderson purchased her house for $630,000 in 2009. She says it is of higher value than nearby units, which were constructed more recently and have less desirable features. Zillow says its customer service agents told Anderson the easiest way to adjust it is to add more details to the estimate, something we've talked about here and something I strongly suggest that you do if you haven't. Let's see. Anderson complained to the company about her estimate for the first time in December of 2016. She claims that Zillow bumped her estimate up to $650 after she complained. Zillow denies this, claiming employees never manually alter his estimate. A spokesperson for the company did say that Zillow encourages homeowners to work with registered real estate agents, which Anderson had at the time. She later terminated her agents to save on costs and lowered her asking price. Her estimate then started to plummet, according to the complaint. Quote, "Zillow is not communicating with Anderson because she's no longer has a broker and thus is not a source of direct income to it." Zillow vehemently denies Anderson's claim that communication ended. So there's a lot of back and forth. Here's the bottom line on Zestimates. Anyone who thinks that the Zestimate is what is deciding what their home is or isn't selling for either is operating in a market I've never known to exist or is an idiot. It just sounds to me like someone who is upset that their house isn't selling for the price she wants it to sell for, and is looking for something to blame. I don't think this is going to get much traction. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, simply because depending on the outcome, this could very dramatically affect Zestimates. Now, why am I taking this particular tack? I've complained about Zestimates in the past. Well, number one, nobody should be able to tell Zillow that they can't run a Zestimate that's based on what numbers they have access to. That's number one. Number two, the bottom line is that, and I've heard plenty of agents complain about Zestimates, what you need to do is whenever you're picking a price, I can't think of a time when I've ever used a Zestimate as a data point for my clients. And I'll tell you what, I can't remember a time ever when I, representing a buyer, tried to use a Zestimate to claim that the home was worth less, or had a buyer come to me and try to claim the price was worth less. It does not happen, because the bottom line is nobody considers Zillow a hard and fast, reliable source for data on what a home is worth. It just isn't happening. If you go into a process of evaluating the value of a home, it's going to be based on comparables and a little bit more experience on the part of the person doing the competitive market analysis. So we'll see where this goes. I actually hope it doesn't go anywhere. I wouldn't even mind if this lady not only loses but has to pay Zillow's costs. This seems like a very frivolous lawsuit, but I just thought I'd let you all know about it. Next on our list, mortgage applications rise 2% as more buyers hit the spring market. I think that's okay news, I guess, but we're continuing to not see big inventory increases across the country. Mortgage applications increased in the latest weekly survey. Homeowners misjudge value again, and this kind of, I think, falls in with our Zillow story. We've still got homeowners that are believing that their home is worth more. Homeowners again misjudged the value of their homes in April, with their estimates coming in 1.9% above those of appraisers. So this has been consistent, right? For a while there, we actually had people underestimating the value of their homes, and that changed right around November of last year, and now it's been pretty consistently higher. Now, another interesting that's going on in the marketplace is that one article talks about the lower number of higher end homes selling, but we're setting all new records in high end homes in terms of the price that's being paid. Just another testament to the inventory problem. The only reason you would get a smaller number of sales that are going for higher prices is because you're seeing more buyers than there are inventory, even at that price point. And we've talked about luxury markets before. Luxury markets are interesting because a lot of times you can tell, get an idea for the overall health of a marketplace, because luxury markets tend to be one of those ones that respond to bad stuff earlier than others. At least it did in my local marketplace. So sometimes you can get a better feeling for the overall health of a market, or where a market might be going, by looking at those marketplaces or those submarkets that tend to be the canaries in the coal mine for your area. If you've got someone who's been a real estate professional in your area for a long time, even through the downturn, a lot of times they'll keep an eye on certain areas. I know I do that. And I've actually seen very weird trends in my local area where, for instance, Gilroy is continuing to increase in prices, but Morgan Hill is sort of flattening and even going down a little bit. And that's the opposite, right? The last time we saw a downturn, things sort of declined the further out you went away from Silicon Valley, and got a little bit better as you got closer to Silicon Valley. So I'm seeing some odd indicators there that I'm keeping an eye on, which is one reason why I'm a little bit hotter to get my home sold now than to wait, because I actually think that we may see a continuing downturn here. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break here for a minute, but don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Appreciate you tuning in, taking time to spend a little of your valuable day with me. We've talked about a variety of issues. You know, I swear, with all the articles that I've got stored up from over the last few weeks, we could go on for an awfully long time. And if you've been listening for a while, you know we've been kind of setting a stage here, trying to figure out where things are going to go. We've talked about some of the scary things as it relates to credit card debt and to educational debt, to student loan debt, default rates. I don't remember if we talked about this one, but the default rates among some of these things is getting scary. And I'll tell you something else. And this is maybe I'd love to do a show on this if I could ever get the author of this book on the show. I am about halfway through a book called Fed Up, which is written by a woman who has worked in Wall Street. She's also been a member of the Fed in Dallas. She was an analyst, a researcher who was correct in anticipating the downturn that we experienced in 2007, 2008. Everyone called her nuts. And when she ended up being proven absolutely right, the head of the Dallas Fed brought her back after she took some maternity leave and said, you know, I'm not going to put you back in the research group. I'm going to give you complete autonomy, and I want you to work specifically for me. And she's produced this book that came out just a couple of months ago, Fed Up. It is a mind blower. And she has some very interesting things to say. And I'd love to get her on the show to talk specifically about real estate stuff. So if somebody out there knows the author of Fed Up, send her my way. I will go looking for her, and hopefully we'll get her on the show. All right. So we're talking without getting into crazy detail, and I'll be happy to do this again. I mean, if you're a new listener to the show, and it would be valuable for folks to be able to get and you know what? Maybe that just makes sense. Maybe later this week we'll do a recap show of all the things we've talked about in shorter terms. To sort of briefly hit it, we've been talking about debt being the thing, and how once people get to a certain point where debt is now overwhelming, they will tend to respond in the same ways in terms of the things they'll go without, or the things they'll cut, or the things they'll stop paying, because debt is debt, right? We've also talked about now the amount of debt that's currently floating around out there as it relates to student loans and credit card debt and auto debt. Just the student loan stuff now exceeds the peak of our housing debt by... what is it? I think I remember we made a big deal when it finally was more than that number. The number was $1.3 trillion in housing debt. Student loans hit $1.31 trillion a couple of months ago. And if I'm not mistaken, it's now up to $1.45 trillion, I want to say. I don't have that article right in front of me, but I remember reading it about a week and a half ago. And that's not included. Then you can stack on top of that the auto debt and the credit card debt and all these other things, and it's a scary, scary big number. And it gets addressed to some degree even in Fed Up. So I'm going to strongly, if you are someone who would like to read this book, I'm going to suggest that you head on over to the website, therebelbroker.com, and you click on the button in the show notes telling you to join audible.com. If you join Audible through that link, you're actually also supporting the show. So it's a great way for you to show your love. If you're going to get a book anyway and you want to get it through Audible, that's the place to do it. So feel free to click the link there and give the show a little love. And in any event, moving on here, we've talked about all the different things that have happened in terms of how credit ratings are being degraded again. This time, instead of simply saying, oh, you know what, your credit rating's low, we'll loan to you, we're changing what makes your credit score better. We are propping up a higher credit score when you would have scored lower. Remember, we talked about ignoring medical debt. We've talked about all these various programs to make things like your power bill or your water bill have more influence on your credit rating to boost it artificially. None of these are good things because the bottom line is those elements aren't credit. Those are about money management. They're not about credit because that's not a credit thing. You don't pay your water bill long enough, your water just gets turned off. So these are all very interesting things. And now we're kind of in another position that's not good because it's almost as if the system is being set up like it was before. So that when everything is said and done, if things go really, really badly, you will once again be on the hook. So this is from Housing Wire, and the headline reads, FHFA director. Next year, taxpayers will foot any Fannie or Freddie losses. According to says the conservatorships are not sustainable and need to end soon. So the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Melvin Watt testified before the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs as to the state of the government-sponsored enterprises conservatorship. So if you'll remember, when they talk about GSEs, they're talking about government-sponsored entities like Fannie and Freddie, and they've been under conservatorship because of the horrible catastrophe that was sort of ushered into our lives by a lot of the actions of these organizations. According to Watt, quote, I have said repeatedly, and I want to reiterate, that these conservatorships are not sustainable and they need to end as soon as Congress can chart the way forward on housing finance reform. But he also pointed out that while reform is needed, the conservatorship period has been good for the GSEs and for the housing market, according to him. Quote, however, it is important for all of us to recognize that the conservatorships have led to numerous reforms of the enterprises and their operations, practices, and protocols that have been extremely beneficial to the housing finance markets and have reduced exposure to risks to taxpayers. Now that as the GSEs are called upon to retain zero capital beginning next year, Watt is speaking out. He calls for the 0% buffer, or he calls the 0% buffer irresponsible, something that threatens to derail their operations through the entire American mortgage process. Quote, we reasonably foresee that this could erode investor confidence. This could stifle liquidity in the mortgage-backed securities market and could increase the cost of mortgage credit for borrowers. Now, what he's basically talking about is that there's no margin money to cover really bad stuff. So if things do take a dump, you're on the hook. Now, that should not feel unfamiliar. Remember how many billions and billions of dollars now, and ultimately, and this was something we complained about a lot on this show, Congress kept simply passing bills. You might remember about every 2 or 3 months, there'd be another bill with hundreds of billions of dollars put aside for Fannie and Freddie, for these government-sponsored entities. And at some point, Congress simply said, whatever amount of money we end up having to give, because it was an embarrassment, right? Every time they did this, the news channels kind of pushed it up and prodded it and brought it up to people's attention. And so you kept getting tapped on the shoulder with, oh, by the way, today the government just handed off another 250, 300 billion bucks to the government-sponsored entity. So it wasn't like it was a story and it went away. It was a story, and then a couple of months later it came back again because it kept happening. They kept having to vote more money into it because of how horribly these things were performing. Finally, government just simply passed through the House and the Senate. Whatever amount of money that the government-sponsored entities need, we'll give it to them. So an endless amount of money, which doesn't sound like very responsible money management to me, but hey, I don't run a government. And this is a creepy thing because this basically now puts us back into a situation where we've already got things that don't sound great. And I'll tell you what, if as I said, I'm halfway through Fed Up. I absolutely want to do a show about it when I've finished it. But it's creeping me out. If the things we've floated around in terms of things we were concerned about, it absolutely sort of feeds that bit of my brain that says, you know what, selling your house now is probably one of the smartest things that you're going to do. So it's a scary thing. I'd strongly recommend you read it if you're so inclined. But this, again, is an element outside of that sets a scary stage for what might happen if things don't continue to just come up roses for the next 10 years in real estate. Now, as we try to sort of get a survey of the scene and figure out where things might be going, one of the things that we talked about, there's really two ways for the situation to get better in terms of prices: fewer buyers or more inventory, right? That's really the only two ways you can adjust this equation. We're seeing tons of areas, as we just mentioned before, where, and even in a lot of luxury markets, where you're seeing much fewer sales, but much higher prices. And that's exactly what's happening. And it's a dynamic of an imbalance between the number of folks out there looking to buy and the number of properties out there to buy. So we've talked before about one of the reasons. I actually had a listener who was, why am I always talking about increasing inventory? Well, because that's more easily controlled, right? How do you convince someone to sell their house? I suppose if the government really wanted to promote that stuff, maybe they would have a tax incentive to sell your house, to encourage people to move now rather than wait a decade or 5 years. Because a lot of folks, there's other articles that have come out recently talking about how more and more people are staying in place. They are not looking to move at a much higher rates than before. So given all of that, we could theoretically come up with some great tax exemption thing. If you sell your house, you're not going to have to pay any nothing. No capital gains, no nothing if you decide you want to sell. The only other way that's reasonable is to attack the inventory side of things. And of course, that feeds directly into builder confidence. And we've seen a pretty respectable jump. Now, the National Association of Home Builders, and these are the folks we check in with about every month, reported the housing market index was at 70 in May, up from 68 in April. Now, that's good news. That's considered a pretty big jump when we talk about these numbers. Any number above 50 indicates that more builders view sales conditions as good rather than poor. So it's good numbers. But remember, we've also talked about this number in terms of how deceptive it can be when it's not accompanied by other things in the market that tell us that home builders are actually building homes. You can say you're optimistic about a market, but if you don't take the actions that indicate that optimism, what the hell good is the number? So I dislike when folks simply report, hey, you know what? The confidence amongst builders is higher, without then starting to have a chat about, well, are they buying lumber? Are they paying architects to design new homes? Are they getting permits to start building stuff? And what's interesting is we are seeing stuff indicating that things are heading that direction. In the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to see the latest data on billings for architects, which will be a big one, and permits and work started. But we do know from this same time period that lumber sales have increased. So that's an indicator, right? You're buying more wood because you're building, and we'll see how that feeds into this optimism and see if that actually ends up equaling more homes getting built. One thing I'd want to draw your attention to, though, is the National Association of Home Builders Index since January of 1985. What's super interesting about this chart, and I'll post this one to Pinterest, is that we are now back at the levels that we were seeing in terms of just the housing market index, right? And optimism, how well they feel about these things. We are now at the same level. Once we went over 70 or at 70, we were back to about the same level that we were in January of 2005. So that's a good thing from the standpoint of there was building that was happening in that time period. That optimism was from about January of 2003 and 4. There was a 2 or 3 window in there where we were at that rate. The last time we were above this level would be way back in 98, 99 when we were hitting close to 80, probably hitting 77, 78. So that level of optimism should be indicating a lot more action, but we're absolutely not seeing the level of building that went with this same level of optimism back in 2004 and 2005. And then, of course, we bottomed out in 2009 as things just really tanked for homes. So we're going to have to take a wait and see attitude on whether or not this equals a lot more homes. I feel like we're going to see more homes, but I'm just not sure we're going to see it overcoming in most markets the demand. Now, it may balance out some markets in some areas, but I know in my area, things are still so crazy. It's really hard to see that making a huge dent, at least in a timely fashion. All right, folks. I hope that's been some valuable information for you. I'm trying to come up with a more fast way to get my shows out there. So what we may see is a little bit more focus on just getting the RSS feed, a little bit more time spent putting together the show notes. And I apologize for that for the folks who rely on those. But it's kind of a necessity right now with everything being so tight in terms of time. I will go back to the old way. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that, so you start wondering, well, why am I not seeing as much in the show notes as I used to? So definitely rely on that RSS feed. If you're someone who just goes to see the posts on the website, those may not be as up to date. However, the player on the front page of the website will always be totally up to date because it feeds off the RSS feed. And of course, if you're doing this through YouTube, YouTube obviously will still be as up to date as anything else. If you're doing it through iTunes, if you're doing it through Spreaker, if you're doing if you're consuming it through some other way, then directly on the website from my actual posts on the website, you'll be fine. So I don't want to freak anybody out, but just want to try to be as transparent as possible about things that are coming down the pike. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I will talk to y'all next time.